Well, I'm kind of getting the feeling that there's some kind of holiday today. Oh, I know. Happy first Sunday in Lent. Oh, wait a minute. Is it also Valentine's Day? You know, I have to admit, I've had a love-hate relationship with Valentine's Day. Mostly hate. Not that I'm not for love. I'm all for love. There's just something to me about the forced expression of that love on a particular day that I think has tweaked me a little bit. Or perhaps it's because I grew up in a time when, before everybody got a ribbon. And so the number of Valentines that were in your box were somehow an indication of your popularity or your worthiness of love. By the time I got to high school, it was roses. The student council used to sell roses. And, you know, if you loved somebody, you'd send a red one. If you were friends, you'd send a yellow one. And then, of course, there were some kids that didn't get any. I think there might have even been black ones. I'm not sure. But anyway, so it became this sort of indication of how well liked you were, how well loved you were, how popular you were. And, you know, I noticed that there's a whole lot of outer expressions that seem to define our worth. I happened to turn on the TV for a few minutes yesterday and just watched one series of commercials to see kind of what were the messages that came through in those few minutes. I found out that I'm driving the wrong car, that I'm not thin enough, that I don't vacation in the right places, and I probably never loved my children because I didn't use the right laundry detergent. We're continually bombarded with messages that somehow we should be validated out here, that our worth is determined by all those things that make us look good or feel good, that our worth is determined by the messages that come from outside of us instead of the ones that are in here. So last week we began this journey into the book Rising Strong by Brené Brown, and we talked a little bit about how important it is to value and honor our stories, and not just to tell the parts of the stories where we come out the hero, those parts that make us look good, to also acknowledge those parts in between, those parts where we struggled, those parts that were hard, those parts where we fell flat on our face. For two reasons. One, because it connects us, because we've all had those moments in our stories, right? Where we didn't look so pretty, where things looked a little hopeless. But secondly, because when we can acknowledge those parts of our story, we also get a chance to validate those qualities that saw us through, that allowed us to come out the other end. The strength, the resilience, the faith, the hope, whatever it was. And when we can acknowledge those qualities that exist in the middle of our stories, then the next time we're in the middle of another one and we can't see the end, we can call upon those same qualities. Well, a while back, I came across this blog on love by a psychotherapist and author, Matt Lucado. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks, but I loved it, and I've been sitting with it ever since. He said, "What if love never feels safe? What if it was never meant to provide you with consistent feelings of comfort, certainty, and security? What if it comes spinning out of the stars, offering something much more radical, creative, and transformative than safety could ever deliver? Perhaps it wasn't safety we are seeking after all, but wholeness and an untamed, erupting sort of aliveness." Isn't that awesome? Yeah. I love that because I think we've mistaken that idea of love as something that's going to provide us with safety and security. And there is a connection to that divine love within us that does give us a place of center. But you know what? We didn't come to this planet to play it safe. We came to this planet to be awakened, to remember who we are, to have our roots shaken from the earth, to have our illusions challenged. And love is as much about that as it is about comfort. He goes on to say, no matter how many profound insights you have, how many amazingly powerful awakening experiences you collect, or how convinced you become that you have it all together, you will always be at risk for the beloved to step in and pull the rug out from underneath you. Been there. He or she will do whatever it takes to reveal your true nature as open, naked, and outside the realm of the conceptual altogether. Outside the realm of the conceptual. When our humanity is challenged, we get to remember we're so much more than human. When you are totally unclothed of all your spiritual concepts and certain safe knowing, love will show you what you are. When the known crumbles away, all that remains is your burning heart. There is nothing more alive than that. There is nothing more sacred than that. We can't step into the unknown. We can't live in the mystery when we're clinging to who we think we are, to how others defined us, to the limited realm of our beliefs. Love is there to shake us out of our safety and to say, you are so much more. Come play. It's in our biology to make meaning out of things. We like to be right, don't we? Yeah, feels pretty good, doesn't it? We like to have the answers. There's something comforting in that. In fact, there's studies that show in our biology, when we come to a conclusion about something, when we have something figured out, when we have the answer, there's actually a release of dopamine, that feel-good chemical in our bodies that gives us validation when we have a meaning, when we have the answer. And we have this illusion that we go around gathering evidence, and then we form a conclusion. But in reality, what happens is we form conclusions like that, and then we spend our time gathering the evidence to support that conclusion. So perhaps at some point early on, because of messages you received from well-meaning parents that maybe had a rough past, or teachers, ministers even, perhaps somewhere along the line, the message you received was that you are not worthy. You're not worthy of love. You're not worthy of success. You're not worthy to live your dreams. And so you have that message, that conclusion. And whenever you enter a relationship, whenever you enter a job interview, whenever you enter a situation in your life, that conclusion exists. And so then you begin to look for the evidence that supports that conclusion, instead of the other way around. What love invites us into is the opportunity to examine those stories that we have heard and come to believe, and to shake them up, to break them apart, to question them, to get curious about them, so that we can begin to draw conclusions that support our good, conclusions that bring us into the truth of who we are. In Rising Strong, Brene says, just because someone isn't willing or able to love us doesn't mean that we are unlovable. Think about that. Just because your mom, your dad, your siblings, your ex, whatever the case might be, just because they weren't able to love you doesn't mean that you are unlovable. You know, this idea of rejection, it's something we've all faced, whether that be in a love relationship, whether it be in a job we interviewed for, something that we put out as a dream of ours. Rejection is actually a very neutral energy. It is simply something that says, this is not a fit. This is not a fit. But all the emotion that comes behind rejection is our own stuff. It's our own unworthiness that in those moments comes rushing to the forefront and says, "You are not enough." We may be going along feeling pretty good about who we are, feeling self-assured and self-confidence, and then we have a moment like that, where someone leaves or that dream job we were working for falls away, we get laid off, fired, whatever the case might be. And then all of a sudden, all those old messages come rushing to the forefront, and we get to see where we still have an opportunity to heal. Because I firmly believe that every issue we have in our life, whether it be with money or love or career, at the root of every issue we have is a sense of unworthiness. Unfortunately, much of that came from ideas within the church. There is this whole idea of original sin that was created by a group of old men in some dusty room long, long ago as a way for the church to control and manipulate people. Because if you felt that you weren't worthy, then you had to come to them for validation. If you felt you weren't good enough to go directly to God, then the church had the power to intervene. No person has the right to judge our divinity or to write the story of our spiritual worthiness. No one. And that idea of original sin is a man-made concept. It is time we understand that we are an original blessing. That we are created in the image and likeness of a loving God, of an amazing God, of a divine energy, a force of love. We exist in a force field for love that is so strong that it will not settle for us believing in anything less than the incredible beings that we are. So we are in a time of Lent. Some of you who follow that may have gone to an Ash Wednesday service and may be entering into an intentional 40 days. The idea of Lent is that it's a time of preparation. It's a time for us to release what doesn't serve us anymore. Now, you can go ahead and give up chocolate if you want. But chocolate really serves me. Instead, I would invite you to give up your ideas of not enough. Give up the thought that you are not worthy enough for whatever it is. To make this time where we talk about repentance, which is a highly charged word, repentance simply means to turn back. This is a time of turning back to our truth, turning back to our divine essence, to remembering who we are. You know, a couple weeks ago, there was a question asked about why in Unity we don't use the Bible more. And I think that it's because we have forgotten that the Bible is a living document. It was never meant to be the be-all, end-all. It was never meant to be taken as the literal word of God. It is a telling of stories. It is the stories of our people. It is the story of unfolding consciousness. It is the struggle of people to find meaning in the circumstances of their day. But it is a living document because when we read those stories, when we study those stories, those of the Christian tradition as well as other traditions, we have an opportunity to find our own meaning in it. This 40 days is something that you see throughout the Bible. The idea of 40. It is a time of completion. It is a time of journey in which you are on a path of some sort. And so we read about Jesus going into the wilderness for 40 days. And it says that there he was met with the devil, and he was tempted. Well, if we look up what Charles Fillmore said in The Revealing Word about the devil, he said this. He said, "The devil is a state of consciousness adverse to the divine good. A mass of thoughts that has been built up in race consciousness through many generations of earthly experiences and crystallized into what may be termed human personality, which opposes and separates itself from God." So as we look at Jesus on this journey, really these opportunities that this being is offering him is really a chance for him to look at that illusion state, that state of consciousness that challenges each one of us at points in our life. He is invited to turn the stones into bread or to jump from the temple walls. He is given the opportunity to have all the kingdoms of the world if he would just prove himself. Well, this is a story of our daily journey, isn't it? That we are given constant temptation to be defined by that perfect car, that perfect body type, that perfect relationship. Whatever it might be, we are constantly bombarded with opportunities to either let ourselves be defined out here or to come back to a place of knowing and remembering who we are. This is the week of the rumble in our book, and Jesus definitely rumbled. He shook things up, didn't he? That's what I love about him. He was a rebel. He shook our clinging to our illusions. He shook up the thoughts of the day. He challenged the people in charge. He challenged the church. Brene talks about this idea of integrity. And integrity is a concept that I have really explored because one year my white stone word was integrity. So I spent that whole year going, what is integrity? Because I didn't accept the common notions, of course. But I came across this quote by a rabbi that I really love, Rabbi Omar Mann. And he said, "Integrity is the ability to listen to a place inside oneself that doesn't change, even though the life that carries it may change." Merriam-Webster says it is a state of being whole and undivided. Integrity is not about following a certain set of rules or a certain moral code. Integrity is about remembering who you are in any given moment and making choices from that place. It may mean that you say no. It may mean that you break some rules. It may mean that you upset some people. But integrity is about choosing courage over comfort. And Brene says it is about choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them. Valentine's Day is a day for us to come back into integrity, to remember who we are, to remember the love that guides us, that sources us, that shakes us, that challenges us, that invites us, that celebrates us. That is love. And when we are true to ourselves, we're not true to ourselves at the exclusion of other people. When we are true to ourselves, we can be better available to other people. When we are true to our values, which may mean we say no, which may mean we can't be there for somebody, which may mean we have to say goodbye to somebody, which may mean we have to make choices that somebody's not going to like. When we are true to ourselves and our truth, then we are standing in an integrity that lifts everyone up. Rising strong requires a lot of compassion, doesn't it? Because it's continually challenging our illusions and inviting us to let go of what is false. And those who rise strong will face that heartbreak and allow their hearts to be broken open to new possibilities. So I told you last week that I'm going to be sharing a story every week of someone who has exemplified that idea of rising strong. So this morning I want to share a love story. It is a love story between a mother and a son, between a family and a community. And it is a personal story because the woman I'm about to tell you about was the principal at my children's elementary school when they were young. Her name is Delise Hofen. And all I knew of her then was that she was just this amazing bright light. That when you came and dropped off your kids, she would hug them, she would welcome them with a smile. When you interacted with her, you just felt this sense of love and this sense of presence. I had no idea at the time what she had already been through in that moment. She and her husband, Brian, had already faced some tragedy in their life. Her husband had lost his brother, who was only in his 20s, to cancer. Her mom died when she was 18 of a brain tumor. And Delise herself was battling MS. But you never saw any of that when you talked to her. So Delise and Brian began to try to start a family. Well, unfortunately, they suffered through 2 miscarriages. And then finally, the third time, Delise became pregnant with a little girl. Everything seemed to be going well, and she was past that point that she was worried about miscarrying. But because she was a little bit older, she went in and had an amniocentesis, which is a procedure to kind of check the genetics of the baby. And she was in that rare 0.1% of women who, after an amnio, the sac doesn't seal over. And so she began to lose amniotic fluid. As a result, the baby was unable to grow in the way she was supposed to grow. So she was born at 26 weeks. She died 12 hours later in their arms. Well, fortunately for Delise and Brian, they went on from that experience, and they had 2 healthy boys, Zach and Braden. They seemed to be getting back on track with their lives, growing their family, doing the things that families do, when Braden, at 3 years of age, suddenly began to cry a lot and seemed to be in some kind of pain, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. They dismissed it at first, but something in Delise's gut told her something's not right. So she pursued it, went to other doctors, and finally it was discovered that Braden had a large mass in his abdomen. It's called a neuroblastoma, and it's a form of cancer. He had stage 4 at that point, was given a 30% odds of living 5 years. Well, Braden was a fighter, as was his mom, as was his family. And so the community rallied around this family and supported him as he went through chemo and radiation. And Braden went into remission from that neuroblastoma. He was in remission from that, and he was set on course to receive this immune therapy to help boost his immune system so that the cancer wouldn't return. And he was scheduled for that and on taking some final tests when they discovered that the neuroblastoma was back. When it returns, that takes your odds down to 10% of surviving 5 years. Well, in the midst of this horrible news, Delise herself was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. She had a double mastectomy, she had lymph nodes removed, she had her ovaries removed. And I believe we have a picture of the 2 of them as they went through their treatment. Two fighters right there, fighting the good fight and battling through cancer together. Well, Braden was able to receive an experimental drug, and it allowed him to overcome his neuroblastoma. Delise, after her treatment, was cancer-free. But one of the things that she found out in her own journey when she was diagnosed was she became aware of all the resources she had, all the information that was out there about breast cancer, all the support systems. And she noticed how different that was from when Braden was diagnosed. And she came across some startling facts. She learned that childhood cancer is the #1 disease killer of children, even though it receives almost no funding, no research, and no awareness. It kills more children than asthma, cystic fibrosis, diabetes, and pediatric AIDS combined. 80% of children are already at stage 3 or stage 4 when diagnosed, as compared to 20% of adults, because it is often missed. Only one new drug has been approved to combat pediatric cancer since 1980, a period that has seen 50 medications approved to fight adult cancer. The National Cancer Institute's budget was $4.6 billion last year. Of that, breast cancer received 12%, prostate cancer 7%, and all 12 major groups of pediatric cancer combined less than 3%. Well, those numbers just weren't okay for Delise. So in the middle of fighting her own cancer, in the middle of fighting her son's cancer, she started a foundation. Because what else do you do at those times, right? She started a foundation called Braden's Hope for Childhood Cancer. And her intention in doing that was that she would raise the awareness of childhood cancer in our country, that she would seek out funding, that she would find every avenue she could to get people on board and get them involved, to make a difference. She began to refer to herself as a momcologist. Well, I'd like to say that was the end of their challenges, but because of the experimental drug that Braden went through, he developed a second form of cancer, leukemia. Lucky for him, he had a big brother who was a bone marrow match, and Braden has received bone marrow from his brother. So I am pleased to report that Braden is now 5 years in remission from his neuroblastoma and 2 years in remission from his leukemia. You know, Delise had rough days. She had dark days, she had hopeless days, she had angry days. But she walked through those days knowing that she would find the good in those moments. That out of this, even if her child didn't survive, that she would do something good with this tragedy. That she would help other families, that she would reach out. And now that they're back to kind of a normal way of life, no more cancer treatments, she's decided she's going to run a 5K. Now, mind you, she has active MS and has never run before. But that's not going to stop her, I'm sure. So, I tell you that story because it is a story of love. It is a story of how that force of love for another human being, for humanity, for families, can move us through anything that we might be facing. Anything that might be challenging us in this moment. Look around you because you are surrounded by a community of love. And those of you who are out there watching on the web, you're just as connected to this community. In fact, you allow this energy of love to reach out to all different places around our country and our world. So, if you will take a look on the back of your bulletin, there is the Manifesto of the Brave and Brokenhearted that we will be visiting every week. If you are watching online, you can go to Brene Brown's website and you can download this manifesto so you can have it. I invite you to keep it on your fridge. You can close your eyes and take this in, or you can read it along with me. But I invite you to keep it near so that in those moments that you need a little boost, you can read it again. There is no greater threat to the critics and cynics and fearmongers than those of us who are willing to fall because we have learned how to rise. With skinned knees and bruised hearts, we choose owning our stories of struggle, over hiding, over hustling, over pretending. When we deny our stories, they define us. When we run from struggle, we are never free. So we turn towards truth and look it in the eye. We will not be characters in our story, not villains, not victims, not even heroes. We are the authors of our lives. We write our own daring endings. We craft love from heartbreak, compassion from shame, grace from disappointment, and courage from failure. Showing up is our power. Story is our way home. Truth is our song. We are the brave and brokenhearted, and we are rising strong. And so it is. Amen.